meaning it cannot be any more divine, as simple as that.
Okay.
So that's why when we say to you, okay, hold on a second, it has to be sufficient, meaning not depending on nothing.
Yes.
Except, yeah, that's the point.
Okay.
So then in that case it will fulfill the conditions all powerful. And it will fulfill, it has a will. This divine has had a will to decide things, meaning there is no one above him in terms of bureaucracy to tell him what you should do and what you should do. You understand? So now he will continue, inshallah.
Yeah. So, you see, some people say, who defines this? These are characteristics that all intuitively and rationally can arrive at.
It makes sense to me. It makes sense to me.
Exactly.
So like, yeah, when Jesus was born, like that came from the Father, right? That's what was written in the Bible.
But some might say, even before the creation of the universe, the Son, God the Son existed, and he was eternally begotten. But eternally begotten is an action of begetting. So this action is eternally dependent on the Father.
Yeah.
Even worse, eternally dependent on the Father.
Let's see that again.
The action of begetting to take place to differentiate between the Father and the Son. Because if there is a difference between the Father and the Son, and the difference arose due to begetting, one beget the other. But they say this is atemporal begetting. Time wasn't involved. So it's not like, because if you have a time involved, you immediately know the one who is begotten is totally contingent on the Father, totally dependent on the Father. So the way they move around this problem, they say, look, there was no time involved. It's atemporal, eternally begotten. But the problem still subsides. The action of begetting happened.
Why is that?
Because it's an action. Eternal dependency.
Yeah.
So now you have a being or a person or an entity who is eternally dependent. Any being who is dependent, partially, eternally, for a limited time or all the time, is not the definition of the old.
According to who? According to who?
According to anyone with a rational inquiry.
That's according to Islamic theologians.
No, okay, let's start again.
Wait. That's not according to the most reputable philosophers.
Hang on, let's start again.
Let's start again.
And this is the Christian bias comes in, because they know the second person of the Trinity does not fulfill a maximally perfect being.
Yes, it does.
Yep.
So the third one does.
Which one? No, the second and the third don't.
You say both.
Both of the second and
They
the
both
third.
don't.
Okay, Jesus and the Holy Spirit
They don't.
So that's fine. Okay.
Don't.
So I just want to
And that is why the Christian philosophers today are trying to somehow
Christian
get away. Look,
Philosophers
okay,
are
let me ask you
Christians.
again.
Yep.
Do you think a being that is dependent can be called maximally perfect?
Yes.
How?
Also, you're conflating terms. So we don't think that Jesus is a being.
I'm not talking about Jesus. Am I talking about Jesus in my term?
I know, but you're missing.
I'm saying a being. So I haven't defined what a being is.
Okay.
Neither have I defined a person. We know what perfect is.
Then I
Free
don't know
from
what you're
all
talking about.
imperfections and weaknesses.
Right, sure.
A being who is dependent on someone or something else, is that a maximally perfect being, or is there a being who is more perfect than that being?
It can be maximally perfect.
So that means, are you saying?
It's not
So
prevented
so
to
let's
be
understand
maximally
that.
perfect, like
So
the
let
other
me understand it very clearly here.
Makes sense. Doesn't make what he
I'm
says.
getting lost in
Okay.
perfections now, but
So-
you guys carry on. I'll
No, because I want to continue speaking to you, because I've spoken to him before. We can continue later, but you can join in.
Yeah, sure. I don't
If
wanna derail.
you have a being who is absolute without any deficiencies, any weaknesses, and you have a being who has deficiencies and weaknesses, who is more perfect?
Probably that one.
Exactly.
I agree.
So any being who is dependent and any being who is independent, you know who is perfect and who is not perfect.
That's a fallacy.
The one who is dependent, like your bike, is not more perfect than the creator. Because the creator, by definition, God, is independent and the bike is dependent. So how can you say a dependent thing or an object or a being or an entity, a person, can be likewise the same as an independent being?
Because you circularly presuppose that dependence is a weakness, which you've never substantiated.
Do you see?
In your,
Okay.
wait, in your argument,
Let's
you
hear
said
it.
is a weaker being is one that has weaknesses lesser than a one that does not have weaknesses.
Go ahead.
I agree with that, obviously, of course. The one that has weaknesses is lesser, right? But you're implicitly assuming that dependence is a weakness. I'm asking you now, without circularly
Okay.
presupposing it, substantiate
I will do
that
now.
dependence, as
No, I think we left that argument last time.
is
Listen.
a weakness.
Yeah, you made your point.
5 seconds. not an example of dependence, not a specific example. I mean, dependence in principle is a weakness. There's
Exactly.
a huge difference
Exactly.
between those two things.
Which
Substantiate-
let me-
Which philosopher?
Let's-
Which
let's-
philosopher?
one second.
Okay,
Let
we'll
me-
come back
let
to that.
me- let me tell
Because
you
you talk
something,
about
yeah?
philosophy, we'll talk about philosophy.
Are you?
Yeah,
Okay.
sure.
Listen, let me tell you something.
Yeah.
The simple thing, we all, me, us and you, we agree, is God all powerful?
Yes. In principle, yes.
What do you mean in principle? Not in everything. So in some other, what do you mean by in principle? Because
principle.
I like the things which is clear. When you say in principle, meaning there are things that he's not all powerful. Are you saying this?
In principle means that you're talking about the proper philosophical definition of what it means to be
Simple
God.
as that. We all agree and mention in the Bible, mention in the Quran that God is all powerful. Yes. So if you say is all powerful, now when you say is all powerful, can God become not all powerful at certain point?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Wait.
that's,
No,
that's the point. You see here. That's the point here.
ceasing to be all
See,
powerful.
you see here.
That's the Christian problem.
That's the Christian. You see here. When you say they're saying like this, yeah. They're saying no, God is all powerful, but sometimes He chooses not to be all powerful.
Can I
Meaning,
parody this?
sometimes He will leave the power and become weak.
Islam has this problem
One
as well.
second.
Islam has this
One
problem
second.
as well.
One second. We'll come to Islam.
Okay.
Let's talk about Christianity now.
Yeah.
So sometimes God will choose not to be all powerful, so He'll become weak. Now sometimes instead of is God Almighty, they will say yes. But Jesus wasn't Almighty because He was humiliated on earth. People, they hit Him, they tortured Him, and according to Him, they killed Him. Meaning He's not all powerful at that point. Adding to this, when we say to them, okay, is God is all knowing? So they say yes, God is all knowing. Now when it comes to Jesus, Jesus is ignorant of certain things, which means He's not all knowing. So there are, in definition of Jesus to be a divine, that literally all the conditions that even the Christian and the Muslims and everyone, they agreed about the definition of divine, they will withdraw all of these conditions when it comes to Jesus. You see the point? That shows inconsistency
It's not inconsistent.
in terms of defining the divine. I will ask him,
not defining.
what is the divine?
Let's come back to you. Let's come back to you. Do you agree a being is more perfect in the attributes and characteristics, the essential characteristics that we agreed earlier?
Okay.
One who is dependent on someone else, or one who is independent? Who is more perfect and more absolute in
So a mom is more perfect than the baby. That's what you're saying.
No. When it comes to say, you've got two concepts of God. One God relies on someone else to do things.
We're not saying that though.
I'm not talking about your God,
Okay.
right?
That's not.
So one God has to do everything that God tells him to do. Totally dependent, takes orders, and in fact cannot do anything apart from what that other God tells him to do. And the other God is totally sovereign, does things what he wills. Which one do you think is maximally perfect?
You then have two gods.
Exactly.
We
you
only have
two
one
gods.
God.
Which one is maximally perfect?
You've
The
got
one
two
who's
gods.
dependent?
Let's ask this
Go
gentleman.
ahead.
You know,
We only have one God.
Okay, let him think.
Yeah,
You can speak to him, but I'll also continue this
One
gentleman
who
here.
is sovereign.
Even your intuitional tells you the one who's sovereign, not the one who's dependent.
Yes.
So I don't need to go to a reputable scholar saying, no, this bike can be equally perfect with an independent creator. I don't need a quotation from a reputable scholar
you need
or a
a proof.
philosopher.
You can't
No.
assert something without proving it.
I'm sorry, I cannot speak to someone who says it is possible equally that you have this bike who is dependent
No, that's not what I'm
on
saying.
the equal footing on someone who is independent.
That's not what I said.
So now, if you have a God concept of God, in which one God is dependent and the other is not, you would say the one who is dependent cannot be even qualified to be God.
Why?
By definition, God has to be independent.
Why? Why? Prove it.
Oh, okay.
He's never actually demonstrated that
Look.
dependence in itself
I
is
don't
a
need
problem.
to
He's
demonstrate to you. Look,
And he's relied on it being apparently intuitive from an Islamic paradigm. He's never
brother, just 1 second.
no reputable philosopher of religion buys into
Do you see the
idea that
problem?
dependence is required.
He is relying on what?
Philosophers
It
of
has to be
religion.
reputable. Which reputable philosopher that you have read said God can be dependent?
Linda Zagzebski.
And he says God can be
She-
dependent.
Yes.
She said God can be dependent.
Yes.
Okay, that's the God that I'm not going to worship, and you're not going to worship, and you're not going to worship.
you
You know
don't
why?
substantiate anything.
No.
You just rely to
No.
rhetoric
I agree. So you have a reputable scholar whose repute is questioned from me. Why? Because you have a scholar who is saying, oh, a God that is dependent like a bike, who is dependent, is worthy of worship. Look, would you really worship a God? Let me ask you this question. Who is dependent on someone else? Do you think that God is worthy of worship? That God itself is dependent on someone else?
It's got to think about it.
Please think. But you would know when you do think, and you will come to this conclusion, that it is not making any sense for a rational human being, reasonable human being, to take a God as God when that being is dependent. Because God, by definition, has to be self-sufficient. If you say God has been given power, if you give power to someone and they're dependent on someone to give them power, that's what dependence is. So you receive power, you receive authority, you receive the thing to do, you receive knowledge. You are fully dependent on someone else to give you this. That means someone is greater than you. That's what it means. Dependence means the one who doesn't depend on anyone is greater than you.
So someone like Einstein, who would have been read books and learned, given knowledge by people who came before him. Surely he's better than them, because I know who Einstein is and I don't know who they are.
We're talking about in a concept of, when we talk about God, you cannot remember. How did I start discussing with you about this bike?
Yeah.
And you considered immediately how ridiculous it is to worship this bike.
Yeah.
And now we went through a process in which we realized the bike cannot be worthy of worship.
Why?
And we gave reasons.
Why?
You can work it out. So we gave reasons. No, I'm not engaging with you.
Intuition.
Because I don't consider the way you argue is something beneficial at all. Because what you're saying is, my reputable scholars that I follow says God can be dependent. Any scholar who says God can be dependent is not a scholar of that caliber. I dispute their scholarship. You know why? You can get a PhD. Let me tell you something. Do you think it's impossible for me to get a PhD or you to get a PhD if you really work hard?
What's that, huh?
Is it really in philosophy?
If you study,
right. If you study really meticulously and hard, and you're a bright student, you can get a PhD, right? No problem.
Yeah.
I got distinction in masters. I didn't have to work that hard. So does it make me I'm a stupid guy or something? No, it makes me a normal individual guy who works like everyone else. But if I do a PhD like you do a PhD, it is not impossible. But now, imagine I get a PhD, and I have so much publication and so on, and I say weird things like that, you know what, God can cease to exist. Just because I have a theory. It doesn't make sense to say this guy is a reputable scholar. You will say, look, he's out of his mind in his logic and argumentation. He's trying to say something which is totally not right. Listen. I don't, in fact, the logic thing they bring out, logically you can be infinite and finite at the same time. If you bring that logic, I would say, no, thank you. I don't buy this logic.
You can show to me why that's wrong.
Hang on.
Whereas you haven't done that here.
Do you believe that God can be infinite and finite at the same time?
From every angle, no. In principle, no.
Hang on. Let me start again. In any angle, do you believe God can be existent and non-existent at the same time?
No. Well, no, obviously.
Why not?
Because that defies the law of non-contradiction.
Fine. So you abide by the law of non-contradiction.
Yeah, I abide
so
by
do you believe God can be knowledgeable, all-knowing, and ignorant at the say
Yeah, because those aren't contradictions.
You see, now he said...
Wait. You said knowledgeable.
All knowledgeable means...
I'm knowledgeable and ignorant at the
Let
same
me
time.
explain what I mean.
Okay.
All knowledgeable means you have 100% knowledge of everything.
Yeah.
And you're 0% ignorant of anything.
Yeah.
So can you be 100% knowledgeable and 5% ignorant? A being?
Not in principle, no.
No. In any principle.
No, because you need to understand
No. Hang on. Let me ask you again.
You can't define terms how you want.
Let me ask you again.
Okay.
In any way, shape or form in your logic that you study in Oxford,
Yes.
can you be 100% knowledgeable in something and 5% ignorant in the same thing?
In any way, shape or form?
Yeah.
Yes.
See?
Because he's saying, okay, look, if he's saying from every...
That's Christian logic.
This isn't Christian logic.
It is.
This is basic definitions. You said in any way, shape or form.
Yeah.
Right? One way, shape or form would be if you apply different definitions. right? Is that
Or are you
not
going to
any way,
redefine at one point here
You
conveniently
said
and
you
another?
could- No, this is the reason. When you said it in any way, shape, or form, I'm just going with what you said. You
Yeah.
said in any way, shape, or form.
Sure.
One way to
Give an example.
obviate that problem would be to fallaciously define them wrong way.
Now, give me an example.
Okay, so I define all knowledge as literally knowing everything, and I define ignorance as having a bicycle, right? It's ridiculous.
Hang on. Ignorance as defining what?
As having a bicycle, something stupid, right?
No, that's not the definition. That's discarded in the first
Which
place.
is literally my
When-
point.
No,
That's literally
no,
my
no,
point.
no. The reason when we talk about
This is my
knowledge,
point, Mansur.
look, as an Oxford student, you should really be more sensible.
I am being sensible.
No,
I'm
you're
trying
not.
to show you how
Let
you
me
can
let
play
me
with
tell you
definitions,
something.
and that's
When
why
we
you
talk
need
about
honest
knowledge,
discussion.
right? Knowledge means what? What does knowledge mean?
I don't know how you define knowledge. How do you define knowledge? You act like that's a basic
Okay,
question. You
do
know that's
I
been
know your
debated
name?
today.
Possibly not, because I haven't asked you and you didn't
your
tell
name?
me. Do you know my name?
No, what's your name?
Yeah, Mansur.
Mansur, that's me, I'm Rob.
Okay, nice meeting you. Now,
What's your name?
Luca.
Luke. I'm Rob.
what's your name again?
Rob.
Rob, now I know your name. So in my understanding, in my knowledge base, I have got your name,
What
right?
is knowledge?
I don't have to discuss
Exactly.
that. I'm not talking to you.
You can't
I'm not
ask a
talking to you.
question
I'm
when
talking
you
to
can't define it
I'm talking to Rob.
You've given an example
So
of
now,
knowledge,
Rob,
not definition.
I am aware in my consciousness, that you're called Rob. You go by the name Rob.
Okay.
Now, if I was all knowledgeable being, meaning
Yeah.
I do not have any limitation of time. I know your name from eternity to eternity. There is not a fraction of a second in time in our understanding of time
Okay.
that I will not know your name. That's what I mean by all knowledgeable. So I will always know your name, like I always knew your name, and I always will ever know your name.
So all knowledgeable is knowing all facts forever.
No, that name of yours, for example,
Yes.
in this instance,
Yeah.
that I will always know. There will not be, when I say all the time means what? No limitation of our past, present and future confinement within this time frames. So when I am all knowledgeable, when God is all knowledgeable of your name, Rob, there cannot be a time in the future when he will be not knowledgeable of your name. That's what I mean by all knowledgeable. Now if I ask you, can the same God know your name and then not know your name tomorrow for 30-second window? Tomorrow at 8 o'clock,
Yeah.
he doesn't know your name. Is it possible?
It's impossible.
Is
for
it
him
rationally possible?
to then know my name at all times?
No. Knowing your name all the time.
Yeah, well,
Including
you
all
won't
the
know
time.
Tomorrow at 8 o'clock.
And tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the morning, he doesn't know your name. Does it make sense?
What you're telling me makes sense, yeah.
So he has to know your name, right? He cannot not know your name. He can't just simply say, oh, what was your name? 8 o'clock he says, Rob, Bob, Tom. He can't do that because we've already defined by all-knowing means he knows it all the time.
Okay.
So that's what I mean.
Okay.
Can God be all-knowledgeable and ignorant? The answer is no.
Okay, that's
Right.
Why not?
Can God be? He says, why not?
Can I explain how
Thank
that's
you,
possible?
thank you.
I can explain how
Go
it's
back to Oxford. I'm sure they
If I
teach
can
you very
explain
well.
how it's possible,
I don't
is
need to
that relevant?
explanation.
Okay. Can you explain why it isn't? It is possible. Can you explain why it isn't?
Now, he's showing why it isn't possible, and that's very obvious, right? He's showing that according to the law of non-contradiction, you can't have all knowledgeable and any level of ignorance at the same time, right? And I agree with that, unless there is a rectifying factor which then mitigates that difference.
Okay,
right?
show us how you can
So the
be
rectifying
knowledgeable.
factor would be
So in this example, you're just saying Rob example.
Yeah.
so no, actually, because
Give that example.
we're all talking about God the Son.
No. Rob.
I'm keeping it
No.
relevant. I'm
Rob.
keeping it
Rob.
relevant.
We want to talk about Rob.
It's
You
not
start
analogous.
with
Be
Jesus,
fair,
start
be
with
fair.
Jesus and then go to me.
I'm not sure I can go to because it's not analogous. So
That's
it
the
won't
problem.
work. Because God the
That's
Son,
why Christians try to avoid
because God
the
Son
problem they
is
suffer
not you and
from.
it's God the Son.
Don't try to avoid anything.
Okay,
That's exactly what he's doing.
God the Son is God the Son.
No need to.
God the Son is God the Son, possesses all the divine attributes, omniscience, omnipotence,
No,
omnipresence.
they don't
and so
actually,
on,
they're different.
right? Okay, so he possesses all those. That's God the Son in principle as God the Son. God the Son, by his omnipotence, can also choose to take on an additional nature. That additional nature is a limited nature by his own free will. He does not, this nature doesn't cease to exist. It's not like when Jesus incarnated for 33 years, God the Son just puffed into an existence, because that would be a contradiction of his nature, right? He always existed, but he assumed on an additional nature. That additional nature is the one which was subject to limitations by virtue of his own free will of choosing to assume that nature, right? Now, this nature always had the omnipotence, omniscience, all those kind of things. It still possessed the divine attributes. There was never a time when he was ignorant and all knowledgeable. That's why, in principle, God the Son still remained omniscient. There was no contradiction. We're not asserting that God the Son, qua God the Son, in his nature just as it is, suddenly became ignorant, because that would be a logical contradiction. In the same way, we're not saying with the Trinity, for example, that God is one being and yet three beings, or one person yet three persons, because that is a logical contradiction. We are using the same terms in different contexts, and so they have different parameters under which they're fulfilled.
Go back to Rob.
Contradiction.
So is it
You
like?
can't apply to Rob because Rob is not a divine person of the Trinity.
is it
No,
like-
So you can't
let me tell you why he didn't apply. He cannot go to Rob example, because he knows
don't have to
every single philosopher that he
every
studies,
single philosopher.
any philosopher that he will study.
Wait, I might have the connection. I might not do that. Yeah. Is it like, okay, so I know your name forever apart from tomorrow at 8 o'clock. Because tomorrow at 8 o'clock, I take some drugs and then I can't remember anything.
So
Like,
yeah.
I haven't changed who I am as a person.
So-
but my like.
So when
my
we talk about
consciousness has
when you
changed.
talk about
Is that it?
when you talk about an unknowledgeable being, knowing, affirming that he knows everything, this is
Yeah,
an affirmation.
okay.
That everything included 8 o'clock tomorrow.
Yeah, sure, like so I can know everything, but
Look.
if I have some drugs and then it means I can't.
God being drugged by who? He's independent
So
and
I
unknown.
know it's not. a
Yeah,
perfect
yeah.
analogy,
So I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about God. So
that's
God,
the guy, doesn't
so
matter.
God who is God is all knowledgeable. At 8 o'clock, he still knows your name. You cannot say he doesn't know your name at 8 o'clock
Okay.
because he already knows that name. That 8 o'clock is included in his all knowingness.
You're right. We
Right.
agree on that.
So now, if you have a God who is dependent for everything on someone else,
Okay.
That's different.
that God is not a perfect God.
Wait, Rob,
That's what I'm
Rob,
saying.
Rob.
So
I
a
think-
God that is
wait,
dependent.
I'm confused between me and my nature. Okay, sorry, I'm not God, so I'm not saying that. I'm saying, between God and his nature. Because you were talking about God's
Is his nature perfect? Is his nature uncaused?
Well, that's why I don't want nature.
So let me tell you. We agree God has to be uncaused.
Why?
This is caused.
Again, that's an example.
If God, I'm sorry, I cannot really speak with you. You know why?
Okay, so I actually don't want to interrupt. Sorry, I don't. I
You
say one thing.
every principle, the essential attribute of God, like omnipotence, why? Omniscience,
No,
why?
I don't question
No,
that.
no. This is what you're saying. You're questioning something that is essentially an essential attribute of God. Uncaused,
Okay.
being uncaused, not being
Okay. Yeah.
caused into existence. Because if you say, look, at one point he didn't exist and he was caused into existence.
Yeah.
So was he eternal?
Which we don't say.
Was he omnipotent? No, of course not. He didn't even exist.
We never said that.
So when you question,
Jesus was born as a person.
when you question the uncaused nature of God, you are saying that means it's possible God was caused. If it's possible he was caused, mean at one point he was caused into existence.
Okay.
So that means there was something at one point he didn't exist.
By that logic, yeah.
By that logic, because that's what I mean by caused. What are you causing to? Causing to come into existence. That's what causation means. So
Yes.
God, by definition, has to be uncaused, not
Okay.
brought into existence.
Yes.
Right. Jesus is caused, or the Trinity second member is caused by the Father, by their very dogma in their belief. He's caused. He's generated. He proceeds. He's begotten. He's caused. The Father, according to the model of the monarchical model, like you try to,
Also, the
right?
normal Trinity says this as well.
Whatever, any model, the Father is uncaused. So now you have a being who is uncaused, and you have someone else who is caused. They are not equal, are they? Someone who is caused and someone who is uncaused. If you say they're the same, I leave the discussion here, and you go and study in Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard, whatever.
they're not
okay?
the same.
They're not
We've
the
never
same.
argued. We've
So
never
if
argued that the
so,
Son
if
and
they're
the
not the
Father are the
same,
same.
are they equal in their nature?
Can you be different but equal?
No.
Yes, you can.
When
There
you
we go.
so
Done.
if uncaused makes you fitting to be God,
Why does it make you-
does a caused nature makes you fitting to be God?
Wait, Mansur, I'm going to head out. Can I quickly
Thank
say-
you, thank
no,
you.
I'm going to say something.
Before you leave, yeah,
okay,
go.
before I leave. Okay, a couple of things. So, he's given an example of dependence with the bike, right? And he said, why don't we worship the bike, right? He's ignored the fact the bike isn't omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, maximally good, none of these kind of factors. That's why we don't worship your bike, right? It's also causally dependent on its existence. It came into existence at a certain time. When we say that Jesus, God the Son, or God the Spirit was caused or proceeds or generates, we never said there was a time 0 where he didn't exist and then a time 1 where he did exist. God the Son eternally exists.
Eternally dependent.
Yeah, exactly, eternally dependent. Now, he says, okay,
Not worthy
the
of
fact that
worship.
he's dependent shows that he's inferior or less than he can't be God. But he's never actually shown why dependence is a weakness. And what does he do? He just goes back to the bike again. It's a circular argument. He has to presuppose that dependence is a weakness to make his argument in the first place.
Show me philosophically that
If you
dependence
struggle
is
with
not a
it,
weakness,
talk to me
or is a
talk to
weakness.
that guy, Josh. Well, I'm happy.
You know what?
Carry on, enjoy.
There you are.
No, I'll
Thank
be
you,
around
Luca.
here for a bit.
Now-
Well, nice to meet you.
I'll chat to you.
Anyone who says we need to demonstrate that dependency is a weakness is someone really out of their mind, unless they're a Christian or something like that. How can you even want to show dependency and independency? They're on the same footing. If you are self-sufficient, you are not dependent. And if you are dependent, you're not self-sufficient. Do I need to demonstrate that with quantum logic?
No, it makes sense. So I'm a slow
Right,
thinker,
right.
so it takes me a while to process
So the
things.
reasons why they're arguing and questioning is, look, if I were trained in philosophy and logic, I could have just given him just like that. Why? Because he knows that's the weakness, that I am not using the jargon that he's using. And he can only argue on the basis of, oh, reputable scholars like the ones you mentioned this is okay. But we know how weak they are. Why? Because by definition, any being who is omnipotent has to be uncaused. By definition. All of them, they're all interlinked in their attributes. If you are omnipotent, you cannot be caused. If you're eternal, with no beginning, you cannot be caused. You cannot be other than omnipotent. So these essential attributes go hand in hand together. So the fact that we have found a being called second member of Trinity who is caused and dependent on the Father, by definition is not God. You can call it God, you can call this bike God, some people will do. Some people will call this bike God and worship Him. Some people will call Jesus God and worship Him. But it doesn't make them befitting to be God. Your heart and your mind will know a being who is dependent on someone doesn't befit to be called God.
Okay. Can I try and
Go ahead.
example it?
Yeah.
So I've heard this used before. I want to know what your views are on it.
Sure.
So let's say I have a fish tank. I create loads of fish and I feed them. They're very dependent on me. And then through a science experiment, I make myself a fish and go join them in the fish tank for a while, swim around, have a chat with them, see how they're doing, and then I come back out again. And at the end of the science experiment, I come back out and I'm me again. So should they worship me because they were dependent on me, and then I became a fish, but then I'm not a fish anymore? If that makes sense. So in terms of I want to know what your thoughts are on that. In terms of
Sure.
that is a metaphor for,
So
for God and Jesus.
this is what happened. Jesus was God to begin with, but I'm questioning that point. Before you became a fish, I'm talking about your status before the fish.
Okay.
Right, that point, you're not God to begin with. That's what I'm questioning. Because you are demonstrated in your definition as being caused and dependent on the Father, you're not God. You can call and label yourself, oh, I have a different definition of God. One is called a nominal definition, one is called a predicative definition. You can redefine God to suit your dogma. A Hindu can do that.
Okay.
Someone who's a polytheist can do that. You know what, when I say God, sometimes when I say God, that's the real God, and that's the God actually is not a real God. It's my predication. No, this is all semantics to get people confused and say actually it's God. But when you question, when you say the Son is a God by predication and Father is a God by nominal, what's the difference? There is a difference.
Okay.
There is a difference. Because by predication, for example, you can say, oh, this man is God. But actually he's not God, but I call him God by predication. Because he's nice and kind and knowledgeable. Yeah. But in reality, on the fundamental level, on a pragmatic level, he's not God. Likewise, on a pragmatic level, the Son cannot be deemed in any way God. Because he doesn't have the attributes of God.
So if we're the fish in the fish tank, how do we know that the man who feeds us isn't God?
You'd know.
How do you know that? Because I understand your definition and I agree with
right.
it. But I mean, how do you know?
So you can say, this is how we will eliminate who can be called God and who cannot be God. Anyone who says, I'm God, but I need to eat to sustain myself, I will say by definition, you're not God. You cannot be God. Some people can call you God and worship you God, but you're not really deserving to be called God. The real God who is worth deserving is the one who is one and absolutely unique and self-sufficient, independent, eternal, not produced or producing, and totally unparalleled in terms of power and authority, totally different to everyone else. That is something that you will realize that yes, makes sense. So in the Christian concept, they can bring philosophical thing, do PhDs and whatever, and say, oh, there you go, now we've somehow made, but it doesn't still go away with the problem. You have belief in which something is less than God.
Yeah, I get that, and with that logic, I understand what you're saying.
Something is less than God.
Yeah, I get that, and with that logic, I understand what you're saying. But I mean, like, so Christianity, if that's not the one, then how do you know that your God is self-sufficient?
So, exactly. So
that's my question.
When first we study comparatively, how do we know which scripture and which religion gives us the true guidance from God? You have to have a basic understanding of who God is to begin with, and that's what we have done so far.
Okay.
Starting with your bike and giving an example from Christian doctrine. Okay? So we know that the one deserving to be called God has to have these attributes for our deserving for worshipping that God.
Okay.
Yeah, just like it's not worthy for us to worship this bike, likewise it's not worthy for us to worship Jesus or the Holy Spirit and so on. But the Father, in their definition, fits within the category of being God and being worthy of worship if he has also all these attributes. Yeah, conceptually there will be no problem from our part. Yeah, and that's what we say as well. This has always been the message. Christ was a prophet and a messenger. He came to tell people to worship God, who he says, my Father and your Father. And he says, my God and your God. So yes, we agree with that. Yes, this is what God always said, worship this being only, who is of this nature. Yeah, so we say this God sends us revelation through prophets and messengers. And we look and examine them, and you can actually then say, okay, this indeed is the guidance from God. Quran, we say, is a final book from God, giving us that guidance about who he is and what we are supposed to do in that relationship. And the Quran describes, in fact, you'll be surprised what I said, things which you thought philosophically. This is a chapter in the Quran, chapter 112, Quran al-Ikhlas, and so in the Quran, 114 chapters, and this is 112. Say, he is Allah, the one. One and in his uniqueness. He is a Samad, self-sufficient master whom all creatures need. He neither eats or drinks, but basically self-sufficient. This is what Samad entails. Lam yalid wa lam yulad, begets not, nor is begotten. So he doesn't produce others, neither is he produced or generated or begotten. Yeah? So not himself doing production or generation, or not himself being produced.
So he didn't make things?
No. He himself doesn't produce or beget. And he himself is not begotten.
Doesn't have
so all it means is have children?
No.
Doesn't have children.
Lam yalid means God himself is not born or begotten or generated or preceded, and he doesn't do that himself.
But didn't he make us?
Made us, but
creation.
He creates.
But himself,
he doesn't beget.
Oh, okay. Beget is different to create.
Begetting is an archaic English word, means siring a child. Right? When a father has a child through relationship of physical, that's begetting.
So using this logic, that straight away.
So God is not begotten from someone else, neither does he beget. And وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ, there's none to him co-equal or comparable in any way, shape or form. These are only 4 statements, 4 ayat of the Quran, 4 verses. All of them are interlinked, describing the essential nature of God.
These were the 4 you talked about earlier.
Absolute oneness, being totally self-sufficient, independent, the one who's not born and one doesn't produce, totally unlike even. Self-sufficient entails being omnipotent and omniscient and so on. So that's the Quran.
What's the where does this come in the Quran? Like, where does it come in the story of the Quran?
This is a unique chapter. This is a whole chapter.
No. I mean, like, what's the context? So, I know you said it was near the end. So is it like
this is just the Quran is chapters. Some chapters are big chapters which contains stories and things like that. And there's no long-term story. There are some, but not this one. But some chapters are very concise, like this one talks about literally the creed of Islam. This one summarizes what is Islam is about. This verse
Okay,
talks about, say Muhammad, say to them, Allahu Ahad, Allah is one and unique in His nature, one and unique in His essence, one and unique in His attribute. No one similar to Him. That when you describe to one, meaning there is no second, there's no third. It's the one. Yeah.
Okay.
Allah Samad, meaning as well as Samad, it has a very unique term in Arabic, meaning that all the creation relies on Him and He is not relying on no one. Meaning He is sufficient from anything, yeah, but everything relies on Him. Yeah? Everything relies on Him. It's not just only sufficient. In fact, on top of that, He is sufficient from all the creation, as well that all the creation they depend on Him in their existence, in their sustain, in everything. Yeah? Then Allah has described this about His existence, that He wasn't begotten, meaning He wasn't a relation between God and Goddess and produced Him, so He wasn't begotten, nor He begets. No, He doesn't produce children. Yeah? And there is no someone similar to Him or equal to Him in any sort of form. So this kind of concise chapter about the whole creed of Islam, basically as simple as that, concise, to the point.
If you were to examine this logically, is look, if He was one and unique, then He has to be by Himself independent and self-sufficient. And if He's independent and self-sufficient, then He cannot be born from others or begotten. If He begets someone else, then He will not be unique anymore. There will be someone else like Him. And He will not be one anymore, He'll be two. And if He's not begotten, not begetting, independent, self-sufficient, can there be anyone like Him? He will be totally unique. No parallel. That's the last verse says, there's no co-equal in whatsoever anyone along with Him. So this chapter is a very strong chapter describing the purity of faith about the very nature of God. I mean, it directly engages with his Christian belief, directly, and refutes them.
Yeah, like, because it's written,
After.
that's wrong, basically.
Yeah. So to give you an example, in fact, when they talk about logic and philosophers, I find it strange. I want you to ponder on this.
Okay.
If you have...
Ponderous, that I help.
You see this thing on the floor, right? Here, okay? Sorry.
Okay.
Now we want to lift this up. God, the Father, is omnipotent by their definition.
Okay.
And they also agree that God the Son is omnipotent by definition. Omnipotent.
Omnipotent, that's the strength one, right?
The second one, the Son. They say also omnipotent.
Knowledge. Sorry, I'm not very good with potent.
Power.
Power. Okay.
All powerful. Sorry. Both all powerful.
Yeah.
So God the Father wants to lift this up to this height.
Okay.
1 meter.
Okay.
And God the Son wants to lift this up 2 meters high. At the same time on the same object. Where is this going to go?
3
Both.
meters up?
Then none of them are omnipotent. None of them are all powerful because they fail to lift it up exactly where they want to. So 1 meter or 2 meter, that's the option.
Okay.
So where is it going to do? Because they are unique in their will. If they have no will, different wills, then how do you say one is Father and the Son? So one of them wills to lift up 1 meter, other one 2 meters.
Yeah, if they have, if you want to make a different choice, then
Imagine now it is lifted up to here. That makes the Son not omnipotent.
Okay.
Failed to lift it up too high.
Yeah.
And if it goes up there, the Father is not omnipotent.
I get it. Yeah.
You cannot have more than one omnipotent in reality. No more than two absolutes. It's like having a car with 2 driving wheels and 2 independent drivers don't listen to each other and they want to take one to the north, one to the south. Where's the car going to go?
Well, if they want to do different things.
This is why Quran says, لو كان فيهما آلهة إلا الله لفسدتا. Had there been more than one God, there will be corruption and ruin and chaos. It's not going to happen. The universe, one God says rain, other God says sunshine, thunder. The fact that we're still following a particular, it says one is in control. So we say one being, one God, one absolute being is in control of all these things. All these Planck's constants, the gravitational constants, all these constants are so precise. Who's maintaining them? One controller. If there are more than one omnipotent, omniscient, eternal being, there will be conflict of will. You can't just say, oh no, they will together. Why would they will together? Why would they have to compromise? Because you have to be sovereign if you are eternal and self-sufficient. If you're self-sufficient, you don't listen to, okay, I'll listen to you. I'm not going to lift it too high, I'm going to lift it exactly 1 meter. No, I'm compromising my will. Yeah. So
There is adding to this as well. Sort of and adding to this, you know why God emphasized about He doesn't beget, and there's emphasis in this, and Allah has said in the Quran as well. When Allah criticized the Christian, that when they describe that God has a son, that God, He said their statement is so severe to the extent even the heavens will crumble because of their statement, of that evil statement to accuse God to have a son. Why is that? It is perfect for us as a human being to have children, have sons. Why? Why do we need to have children? What's the point? Because we are weak. What's their weakness? Our weakness, that we desire to have children to continue our legacy, to continue our lineage. Yeah? Because we know we're gonna die at one point. So our children will continue this, this genetic, you could say, reproduction from us. And as well, we wanted to continue our legacy. We wanted our name to be remembered. All of these things, or in the old times, they have children to help them, for example, working in the field to take care of us when we get old. All of these things. God doesn't need all of that. God doesn't die, so He doesn't need someone to continue His legacy after His death. So He doesn't die. God Himself is all powerful, doesn't need no one to help Him. That's why when they say He sent the Son to do the sacrifice in order for them to be forgiven, it's the same thing as the same example to lift up this, because God, He couldn't. Either the Father is not able to lift up this stick to this level, so He sent the Son to pick it up to this level, and then He will pick it up to meaning that each one is not so powerful, the Father according to them, or the Son according to the Christian faith. They are not all powerful, both of them. They're not all powerful to do that, to forgive the people. So the Father has to send His Son, and the Son has to die in order so the Father will forgive them, which totally doesn't make sense. If God is powerful, it's simple as that.
Philosophically, from the Christian concept, I've already given you enough examples to ponder on it. We have given you enough example, even on a philosophical level, to see how rationally, whether it makes sense to you or not.
Thank you very much for talking. I'm a slow thinker, so I don't have a lot of things to say.
You reflect on your own self.
Thank you very much for what you said. I generally have the time to actually. Do you have the time?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
You have to go?
I meant to meet a friend at half.
That's fine.
So
It's been nice.
It's good time.
Pleasure speaking to you. If you come again, we'll talk again. Yep.
Please,
Yeah,
and
great
as
to
well,
meet you.
study more and learn more about Islam.
Yeah.
And as well, there's a final thing that to prove that as well Islam is the truth as well. That by studying the Quran. That's one of the things which I urge you to do. We don't have a hidden agenda. We tell everyone, this is the Quran. Just study and read the Quran. And you will see the Quran, this amazing book that guided 1.8 billion people on earth, and still guiding people, and still people coming to Islam and accepting Islam, even during this severe time. Why? Because they found the guidance in the Quran. It opened their heart. So I will advise you and all the audience to open your heart to accept the truth, and open your mind to follow the truth. As simple as that. And see in the Quran, and see even there are statements in the Quran that those are facts. It cannot be said by someone living in a desert 1400 years ago. How come this prophet and messenger who never read and write is able to say these wisdom, which is yet to be discovered 1400 years after his death? You understand? That's why I urge you, my brother, just study and learn, and then you will see the guidance of the Quran. Just open your heart to accept the truth. It's simple as that.
All the best.
Thank you very much for telling me
Take
what you guys believe.
No problem.
Okay,
I've got a lot to think on.